go to see a dentist, and they know it's not ideal. The second thing is that because of this new Canadian dental care plan, many of them, middle income and lower income Canadians in particular, will now have access, sometimes for the first time in their life, to an insurance, a dental care insurance, and will be able to get treatments like a cleaning, an exam, x-rays. If they need a filling, they'll have one. They can replace their dentures, especially if it's been years since they've been unable to replace their dentures. So all of that is good for their own health. It's also good for their ability to participate in life, to feel good, to work, and to prosper. And finally, it's good for our healthcare service and system as well, because when you prevent these people from having to go to the emergency department, to a surgery room under general anesthesia, just because they were not able to have preventative dental care in the first place, then that's bad, because our healthcare system is already overburdened. Healthcare workers are stressed. We don't want that to happen. And the best way for that not to happen is to put into place the new Canadian dental care plan.
Can you tell us, Minister, how many seniors have already been have been part of the enrolled in the process or in the program? And by the end of this year, how many Canadians will be enrolled in the Canadian Dental Care Plan?
You're going to have to get back to us in writing unless you wish to stay past 5:30. So perhaps with Mr. Sousa's round. Mrs. Colleagues, please. Mrs. Vignola, 2 minutes, please. And I have to cut everyone off in order to get our times. And colleagues, please show some respect for Mrs. Vignola. It is her time. Go ahead, Mrs. Vignola.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Quite quickly, Mr. Duclos, I'd like to speak about shared services. Are they aware of who is responsible for the development and implementation of the payments and revenue program at CSBA? So we don't want a Phoenix 2.0. We also don't want an ArriveCan 2.0. Well, shared services has two responsibilities. The first is to provide core services, essential services for digital infrastructure. And the same applies for many other services that departments need to have. So shared services is there to provide platforms and basic services. Second, shared services beyond that can also offer their technological expertise, which is sometimes necessary. So it's up to the department to determine whether or not that's necessary. And does PSPC monitor or oversee the creation and implementation of any testing of this program, of the revenue management program? Or are we going to end up finding out that things weren't done properly? Is that what's about to happen? Well, there are two aspects to this. There's the contract and there's the work. So PSPC obviously has a responsibility when it comes to contracts. They have to make sure all procedures have been followed, that they've been validated, and that the work that is being done by other departments is sort of being coordinated. Then there's the operational side. And then that happens within the departments, because PSPC can't necessarily be involved in all the operations of each department. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, in 1994, the then Liberal government placed a moratorium on the closure of rural post offices. And the minister at the time said, as long as this government is in power, no rural post office will be closed. Is that moratorium still in place?
It is.
Okay. So the Canadian Postmasters and Postal Assistants Union, they've shared with me that since the moratorium was put in place, we've lost 380 post offices across the country, many of them rural post offices. How is it possible that there's a moratorium on the closure of post offices, and yet we've lost 380 post offices?
So a couple of things. First, as we just said, the moratorium is still in place. Second, Canada Post is an independent crown corporation. So it's at arm's length of political interference. It would be inappropriate if the minister...
Specific to the mandate that the government set. So this doesn't have to do with Canada Post. This has to do with whether Canada Post is following the mandate that the government has set for them.
Third is the responsibility of Canada Post to follow that mandate. Fourth, we do know, and we do hear from Canada Post, that there are some circumstances. It could be the death of a particular worker, it could be a disease, it could be a fire, it could be other things that make circumstances difficult. And through engagement with the community, there are avenues, solutions that are being put into place to make sure that Post is delivered despite the challenges that the community is experiencing. So through that, although as you said, it's a moratorium, it has to be applied in a manner which is best supportive of the needs of the particular community.
So here's what's actually happening in my experience is that there are Canada Post post offices with unionized Canada Post staff, and when say there's a fire or say there's a death or say there's another reason why that model is no longer possible, Canada Post pushes to privatize those locations, to contract out those services. Once those services are contracted out, there is no obligation to consult the community when you go from a privatized post office to a mailbox on the side of the road. And we've seen that trend across the country in violation of the mandate that your government set. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Brock, please, for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Minister Duclos, the notorious fraudster, two-person, so-called consulting company, GC Strategies, working out of their basement, received close to $20 million of taxpayer monies during the Arrive scam scandal. We know that 635 other consultant companies, middlemen, have engaged directly with the Government of Canada for procurement purposes. Have you done an examination, sir, of that 635 number as to how many are situated like GC Strategies? 2 people, 3 people, 4 people working out of their homes?
Well, 2 different things here. First, these audits occur all the time. There are auditing teams and officers in many departments, including obviously within PSPC, to check whether there are frauds or inappropriate information not being stored or shared or used. So this is the type of work that is done every day by many departments. Second thing is that, as you saw today, there are instances in which we do find fraud. And if there is fraud, then there is action taken, and there are consequences for those that try to fraud Canadians.
Minister, there isn't immediate action. This government is notorious for being reactionary as opposed to taking proactive steps to weed out the fraud. Why did it take the Auditor General to release a report, the Procurement Ombudsman to release his report, and so, according to your statements, a few tips into the government for you to create yet another level of bureaucracy to do exactly what you've been mandated to do? Your ministry is mandated to weed out the fraud as it's happening. So why did we have to wait upwards to 6 years for this one company who goes back to 2018? Why did it take 6 years to identify these fraudulent billing practices?
Let me come back to that in a moment. The announcement this morning, which shows that we have more and more tools to detect and detect fraud and to seek the consequences that come with fraud. Second, you spoke to the Auditor General and the Ombuds report. Those reports came in January. In November, these contracts with GC Strategy were suspended, so several months before.
Complaint. After a complaint was received by the CBSA, not because of any due diligence by you, sir, or any due diligence by any other of your ministerial colleagues, or any due diligence by the CBSA ministry itself. It happened as a result of a complaint. So that's another example of a reactionary move. You talk about processes, but the process is not working, sir. So what confidence should Canadians have with this new level of bureaucracy moving forward to actively weed out the bad actors? This is taxpayer money that you are mandated, sir, to preserve and to safeguard. And there's just been nothing but examples after examples of complete fraudulent misuse. So what assurances can you give Canadians, Minister?
So, evidence slash action. Whenever there is evidence, there needs to be action, and you've seen this in the last few months. No, there was evidence is produced, there is immediate action. And in many cases that action doesn't require waiting for more evidence. Second, you saw the announcement this morning. This is not additional bureaucracy. The Office of Supplier Integrity and Compliance is going to be provided with lots of tools,
Minister, I'm sorry,
preventative tools.
I have to cut you off in order to get you out on time, but Mr. Sousa is up next. Maybe you can finish your answer under Mr. Sousa's
Yeah,
time,
thank
but
you,
I am
Mr.
trying to
Chair.
get you out the door on your time. Mr. Sousa, go ahead, please.
Mr. Team, thank you very much for being here, and I appreciate that that a lot of work that you have been doing. I mean, I recognize that through the modernization of pay transactions, the defense procurement that you've been heavily involved with over the course of the year that you've been part of, the national shipbuilding strategy, the Canada Lands for affordable housing and other enablements are great initiatives that you put forward. The national capital assets there needed to be confronted, and of course, more importantly, the modernization and the renewal of some of the very issues that you've identified. And I get it. I mean, I know former cuts by the former government, major cuts, didn't help in terms of some of the issues that are prevalent today, even when you have card-carrying conservatives double dipping in procurement, as they have been and as was founded yesterday. So we have to take measures to correct those. And Minister, I commend some of what you and your team have been doing in regards to it. And I want you to give you the opportunity now to discuss some of the methods of detection, the investments being made, the modernization around procurement, and the office now of the supplier integrity and compliance measures that are necessary that you have identified, and what it is that we're doing going forward.
Thank you, Charles. Let me start with housing. A few weeks ago, we announced that the Canada Lands Company will be creating almost 3,000 new houses, new homes in the next year, and 26,000 in the next 5 years. And out of these 26,000 new homes in the next 5 years, 20% will be affordable homes. So roughly speaking, it's about 5,200 affordable homes built by CLC, Canada Lands Company, in the next 5 years. That compares to a total of 1,100 affordable homes in the last 25 years built by Canada Lands Company. So you see how effective Canada Lands Company and other organizations within the federal government can be when we give them the power and the tool and the incentives and the mandate to do good things for Canadians. Let me then speak to the announcement this morning again. This is good news. Now, we are in 2024. We have data analytics abilities that we didn't have just a few years ago. When COVID-19 started, there was a very small proportion of contracts that went through electronic procurement. Now we're about 98% of contracts that go through electronic procurement. This is obviously very good for the efficiency and the equity of the procurement process. People have more access to information. It increases competition, gives better outcomes at a lower cost for Canadians. This is also all very, very good. But it's also good because it provides the government with an ability in 2024 to detect fraud that wasn't there just a few years ago again. So, but those things don't happen by chance. No, you need to invest in those things. And that's why just a few months before the pandemic started in 2018, we decided to invest in electronic procurement, in the type of tool that we're now going to be able to use with the Office of Supplier Integrity and Compliance that we announced this morning. So these things are possible, but they don't happen automatically. You need to invest in them and then to make use of them, as we'll be able to do in the next months and years. So we spoke earlier to the 3 cases that we've already been able to detect and and pursue, but then there will be more. So, and also, not only will there be more, but the signal to possible fraudulent makers, en français on dit I'll try to say it, fraudsters, you say that in English, I think? No, those fraudsters that might want to commit fraud in 2024 should be very, very prudent, because we have tools